The people of Scotland have the democratic right to decide their future. Our constitution, no matter your view on it, affects everyone who lives here. Keep yourself informed. Read the Scottish Government's new paper at gov.scot.
Well, just how you win here. So obviously the video that I just played was the latest advert for the latest independence paper, quote unquote, from the SNP that came out a month or so ago now. And obviously the claim is that it's not related whatsoever to their previous Building New Scotland papers that were coming out for several years. For example, just this was from last year in the Scotsman. Scottish Government to publish one final independence paper. Here's what it will cover. Oh, riveting stuff. The decision, one final paper, the decision comes after Shona Robinson told journalists the government's Building a New Scotland series was in the final stages and almost at the end of the process. Started back in 2022 by Nicola Thinlips, the government has been publishing this series of papers to set out its vision for what Scotland would look like after independence. Now, that's here nor there, really. I mean, I don't really want to get bogged down, I should say, in their tripe in relation to democracy or lack thereof and their obsession with the EU, while they simultaneously conflate that with independence and whatnot. I want to focus on this very briefly. Migration to Scotland after independence. Okay, this is one of their old publications, but regardless, that doesn't mean that just because it's old that they don't hold these views or they don't mutually agree that in time this might become a thing. So as we come down here, and as I say, I'm not going through all of this, fuck that shit. But it says here, just brief, I'll have the cringe is immediate. The cringe is immediate. Scotland, Rainbow Unicorn Lands, has been shaped by migration. No, it's not. That's why we're fucking, even now, according to the butchered last census, 92%, 93% white. I don't know how much that constitutes into an ethnic basis, but let's just say if we're going by the 2011 census, 86, 87% Scottish. We're an ethnic fucking group. I don't understand why that's so hard for people to comprehend, but irrespective, migration has not shaped our country per se. Anyway, that has meant young Scots leaving home to build their lives elsewhere, but recent migration, especially EU migration, has helped change this. Scotland has gone from being a net exporter of people with projected population decline to a country with a growing population. Projected, of course. There's all this emphasis on projected, right? Because we're not having enough babies, but computer models have projected that in the future, all of our population increase will come from migration. Henceforth, we need to act upon it. That is not what I want to talk about, though. I just want to bring this up briefly as well before I go any further. Despite the positive migration story over recent years, the positive migration story, the population of Scotland is again projected to begin to fall. We need solutions for this and for broader demographic change because Scotland's population, like that of many other developed countries, is aging. Indeed, Scotland is the only UK nation where the overall population and the working age population are projected to decline. That's why we need to spread our borders wide open. Wide open. Anyway, so brings me to this. Safe and legal routes would be available for displaced people and refugees, in part as recognition of the growing issue of climate refugees. This government would commit to engaging with partner countries and communities at risk of displacement from climate change to explore whether a humanitarian visa would play your part in our wider approach to climate justice. Oh, yeah. All right. Furthermore, just this bit here. Climate-induced migration provides a case study of a situation where a complementary managed migration pathway could be appropriate and beneficial. Whoa, beneficial. The climate crisis, air quote unquote, is the defining challenge of our time, says who? Well, the science is settled. Despite overwhelmingly being caused by current and historical actions of countries in the global north, there's the guilt trip shit as per, including Rainbow Unicorn Lands, its impacts will be most felt acutely by some of the most vulnerable populations in the global south. A changing climate will increase the stress of the environmental, economic, and social systems of these communities and could increasingly lead to climate-induced migration as people are forced to leave homes that can no longer sustain them. The World Bank has estimated that climate change could compel 216 million people around the world to move within their countries. By 2050, this is one way in which the climate crisis becomes a humanitarian crisis. And remember, the SNP are continuously saying that they intend, in the event of obtaining their so-called independence, that they wish to adopt every humanitarian crisis going, or aiding humanitarian crises. The Rainbow Unicorn government is clear that humanitarian crises require humanitarian responses. I rest my case. Although there is no provision under the 1951 UN Convention for a person to be recognized as a refugee due to climate change, the UN High Commission on Refugees acknowledges that people may be forcibly displaced due to climate pressures, and that the effects of climate change overlay and risk compounding the effects of armed conflict, violence, and persecution. So I just I'm just highlighting this because it's something that is a sort of consensus amongst our political elite as well as our tin pot parliament. Obviously, back in 2018, the United Nations Global Compact for Refugees and Migration was signed. The UK signed up to it, of course. Right? I didn't exactly hear the SNP back then crying out to no end about my sovereignty, demanding a fucking seat at the table back then. Don't recall them having anything to say on the matter. No. Anyway, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, Regular Migration was formally adopted by 164 member states of the UN, including the UK, in December of 2018. Right? And albeit there wasn't much reference, or little to no reference at all, about climate refugees being a factor for displacement and whatnot. However, that doesn't stop. These people beginning to speak about it more and more often. For example, this is from the United Nations Climate Action for Safe and Dignified Migration. Climate change is reshaping our world, intensifying threats to our health, rights, or even life, and driving millions to move in search of safety and dignity. Rising seas, melting glaciers, and drying lands compel people to leave their homes, while extreme weather threatens lives, livelihoods, and futures. The reality is undeniable. Climate change is transforming mobility patterns, demanding urgent and comprehensive action. If we can strengthen policies and legislation in this context, enhance early warning systems, and mobilize necessary climate financing, we can help safeguard people's rights, and make migration a matter of choice rather than despair. If we can promote migration as part of the solution to climate change through safe and regular movement, safe and regular, there's those fucking words again, while ensuring the just transition to greener economies and societies, if we can uphold the rights of migrant workers and their families, we could forge a better path forwards. God. The UN Network on Migration calls on all governments to take immediate action to strengthen human rights-based, gender-responsive, child-centered and inclusive approaches that prioritize the rights, health and well-being of migrants, scale up sustainable and predictable financing for vulnerable communities to strengthen adaptation efforts and respond to loss and damage, make rights-based pathways for regular migration. Point being, right, you're going to get somebody presumably going, oh, well, like the SNP don't have like the ability to like open their borders to these people. But the point is that this is rhetoric that is shared by them all. There's a consensus. They were all signed up to this shit. They're all on board with Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. They're all on board with Agenda 21. They're all on board with everything the fucking UN has to say. They're all on board with the WHO and their bullshit, right? They're all on board with the UNCRC. They're all on board with every single progressive narrative that seems to come and go, right? So when the time comes, mark my words, whether or not we're an independent, air quote unquote, nation, this will become a reality. Really reeks of nationalistic tendencies, doesn't it? Adios.